economy, if I may put it that way.
So two things. One, I was privileged to attend the B20 in India in August this year. And then what was very interesting is that next year, Brazil will be the host of the G20 and the B20. So we had a delegation from Brazil that was taking over from India. But most of them were coming from the BRICS summit. And they said, you know what, we were double the numbers at the BRICS summit than we are in India. So between G20 and the BRICS summit, the choice was to attend mainly the BRICS summit. So that was like a sign of the times that the BRICS is becoming more and more important because they discuss specific issues related to trading local currency, possibility of launching their own currency. Of course, emerging markets, I always give the metaphor of Sisyphus. You know, the Sisyphus was condemned to push the big, huge stone to up the mountain, and then for the stone to fall back. And that's what happened very often in emerging markets. There are few emerging markets that have been able to break the glass ceiling. We mentioned this for women, definitely for countries. There is a tremendous glass ceiling, very, very, very difficult to get out of it. We have seen globalization has been very, very positive for emerging markets in terms of poverty reduction, in terms of improvement of GDP. A lot more needs to be done. And hopefully, this myth of Sisyphus will be broken. And definitely, as we were talking yesterday with an ambassador from Africa, and was saying, this time is Africa's time, and Africa will break all the glass ceilings that we had before and will recover. Hopefully will be so. Of course, the BRICS enlargement is one more possibility. We are meeting without any father or mother from the West. We are alone and we'll take the decisions ourselves. Remains to be seen. Hopefully, yes. But of course, we are in a moment and we'll hear more from the panels that we'll hear right now. We'll hear from Joyce Chang from JP Morgan saying, you know what? The fixed interest rate in the dollar is 5%. My God, where do you go when you have 5% in dollar terms, very little risk? So then that's also having problems with emerging markets, because then capitals flow and move again to the US. So definitely is a sign to maybe hope to strengthen their links to help each other, but definitely emerging markets in many cases have a long way to go. Hopefully, let's be positive for the next generation.
Thank you very much. And I think that brings it to an end. Let's clap for them again for the amazing job. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lourdes, Fred, Anne, and Lorenzo. And I know that you all share our excitement for the publication of the report, and we look forward to reading throughout the year. And we know it's an enormous undertaking, and just thank you for rolling it out here at the conference. Next up on our agenda here is a panel on self investments. This panel is specifically, going to look at delving into economic collaborations in countries in the global South, and we'll have some insight following from Helen Yee, as well as Gökhan Doran, Heather Henyon, and Juan Pablo Ortega. Helen Yee is the president of Helen Yee is the president of Gold UPR. Juan Pablo Ortega is the CEO, co-founder of UNO, as well as Rappi. Heather Henyon is the founding partner of Mindshift Capital. And Gökhan Doran is the division vice president and general manager at Cornell International. And they'll be joining us momentarily. Please.
Good afternoon. Welcome to join the South to South Cooperation panel. Today we have three distinguished guests from different regions, and they are expert there and represent different industries. They will share their insight and answer questions from all of you. First of all, since their titles already introduced, I would like them to do a self-introduction.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hey, you go. That's the spirit. Okay. I thought you guys were asleep after lunch. Thank you. My name is Gökhan Doran. I am representing Corning Incorporated, based upstate New York, very close to Ithaca. Most of you may know, famous with the Glass Museum and its corporation. I'm based actually in Frankfurt, Germany. Originally, I'm from Turkey and been with the company since 26 years and almost done with my probation period. So let's see what's next. I have been in different roles since this 26 years, from sales, marketing, business development, and then switched to the dark side in manufacturing, and then back to business and leading now a division called Corning International. And I want to take a little bit of your time introducing the company and how it works and functions. Corning Incorporated is a 172-year-old corporation and a Fortune 500 company, focuses on optical physics, material science, and also with glass and ceramics. And we manufacture and we develop the manufacturing process for many leading products since this 172 years, and specialized in most telecoms, advanced optics, life sciences, and display. Where I represent Corning International is all these departments outside the US and mainly China, where now the topic of this interesting session is the South, so more emerging countries. And I will be hopefully addressing one of my biggest passions in these in these emerging countries, how to develop, how to get the right choice, make the right choices, and contribute to the countries or the region's growth. Thank you.
Heather.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Henyon. I'm the founding partner of Mindshift Capital. My background is probably pretty different from Gökhan's background, but I had been living in the Middle East for the last, I guess, 20 years, and started my career actually after I got my MBA from Cornell in finance and entrepreneurship, working in microfinance, which I think many of you know what microfinance is. So I worked in microfinance for about 10 years. I started a joint venture between a Saudi family-owned business and a American nonprofit, and this was all in Lebanon, so that added even more complexity to an already very complex joint venture, as you may imagine. And that company, it was called Grameen Jameel, and basically worked in microfinance across the MENA region. So all the way over from Morocco over to Yemen. And we moved the business from Lebanon to Dubai in 2007, which is where I've been based since then, and got involved in angel investing. Started a women's angel investor network called Wayne, the first women's angel investor network in the Middle East about 10 years ago now, and started seeing more and more how many female founders who we were investing in couldn't raise an institutional round of capital. So that led to the kind of the inception of Mindshift Capital, which we started in 2020. So literally we did our first closing 2 weeks before the pandemic started. So it's been an interesting journey, to say the least. And this was all in Dubai. The firm is based out of Dubai, but we actually have a global remit. We've now invested in 18 companies that are in 5 countries. So the UAE, Jordan, Turkey, Singapore, and the US. And we have what we call a gender lens. So we only invest in companies where there's at least one female founder or co-founder. And then just personally, I've been very active in venture, primarily in Middle East, US, and Europe, and have invested in now over 100 early stage technology companies, but I'll focus primarily today on some of the opportunities as well as some of the difficulties of working in these markets.
Thank you. Juan?
Hi, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm sorry I couldn't make it in person. Juan Pablo Ortega, before starting actually before starting Rappi 8 years ago, I went to Cornell, and after graduating, I worked as an airline consultant for a year before meeting Simon, my co-founder in Rappi. Rappi started as a basically food delivery company, and it went from a food delivery company in Colombia to delivering basically anything in Latin America. Today, we do food delivery, groceries delivery. You can even buy a MacBook. You can get cash delivery. And we added other services like financial services, travel. And I was in charge of that for the past, like 7-8 years since we started the company. 2 years ago, I started, well, actually 4 years ago, I started doing a lot of angel investing and working with different companies to help them grow in Latin America. Rappi was the first company in Latin America that received investment from Sequoia Capital and Andreessen Horowitz. So we were the first one to start bringing USBCs into the region. This has changed dramatically, and today we see investments from the biggest USBCs investing in all of the countries in Latin America, and we're starting to see a trend that is happening also in Africa and other regions where USBC, who used to primarily invest in the US, now are investing in Latin America. So 2 years ago, with all of these investments, I saw that payments was a big problem in emerging markets, primarily in Latin America, but I saw the same trends in Africa and Southeast Asia. That was the reason why I started Uno. Uno is a payment orchestrator. We help large enterprises manage all the aspects of receiving payments and also controlling fraud. So companies like McDonald's, InDrive, Avianca, they all use Uno to manage how people pay, and we help them enable local payment methods throughout Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, and we also have connections in Europe, the US, the Middle East, and Australia.
Thank you for your self-introduction. All of them are very impressive. To talk about the topic of the South-South Cooperation, we can call it SSC. And the SSC actually established for several decades, but only for the recent years, it's become so hot. It accounts for about 50% of the global growth. And intra-South, just intra-South cooperation accounts for 25% of the global GDP and 1/3 of the global foreign direct investment. So for each of the panelists, my question would be, what is the main contributors to make this trend so strong? What's your opinion to contribute to that, your perspective about it? Juan, would you like to?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I believe now the panelists before us and the morning sessions talked about a lot of changes in the past couple of years, which we didn't anticipate coming. And now the world is coming to a situation where we have to first acknowledge what's out there, what is the change, and then start adapting us. And I think that goes very much in line with the theme of this conference. Excuse me.
Louder.
Louder. I'm sorry. Okay. This very much, I think, goes together with the theme of this conference, risks and realignment. So now those countries and those regions who are reconsidering their politics, their offers, how they want to be positioned in the new global list is becoming more popular. And that's where my division comes into game in the company I work for. How can we get more attraction in those countries where they want to be the next China? And I remember 15, 16 years ago, where like other all countries, companies were investing in China, and now they have become a big portion of China's economy. And those others who saw this opportunity, and after the dices have been rolled from the beginning, they want to get themselves ready to be the next China, or at least near them. That's how I see it.
Thank you. Yeah. Heather?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, because I think in the Middle East especially, we've had a big challenge with just kind of what we call inter-Arab trade. So very little trade is between those countries that literally border each other, which seems crazy when you think about it in the context of America. It would be like New Jersey and New York, not, not kind of living somewhere and working the other, but it's not like that there in the region. And so it's been a big challenge, I think, just in terms of globalization. And one thing that's been also interesting is I think this is a big opportunity for digitalization, where we've seen, especially with technology companies and obviously post-COVID, in an environment where you really can work, invest, volunteer, all of these different areas, you can do all of it remotely. So it's, in some ways, we live in, I would say, an increasingly borderless society that enables more and more trade between these markets and sourcing and everything else. But then there's also such a kind of localization of just control over supply chain, for example. So one of the verticals that we invest in through Mindshift is food tech. So and especially cultivated meats, where basically meats are being grown out of labs. And a lot of the interest, there actually was just a big announcement 2 days ago in Saudi Arabia through NEOM, which is this new area, this new island basically that they're building. And they're partnering with a US company called Blue Nalu to create new sources of meat and food supply that they can create locally in Saudi. So again, I don't even know how you would break down. This is probably a very interesting business case study for maybe Cornell or another business school to look at. But if you think about all of those different facets of, who's working on this, what's the actual jurisdiction of this, and then also the partnerships, the relationships, the politics, everything else that's happening on a macro level around us is something that we can't really ignore either. So yeah, so I think that it's very difficult right now, I think, just in general with these the kind of business environments and markets, because even though we're trying to keep a lot of the political issues at play, obviously there are strong interests from certain markets like Russia and China that are continuing to have an impact on how we do business globally.
Thank you. Yeah. One.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, one of the biggest things in Latin America in general, we have seen a growth in technology startups that are going beyond Latin America. I agree with Heather's point on how companies are moving to become almost borderless. A couple of years ago, it was really hard to serve a customer maybe in Europe or in the US from South America. And now you can basically offer software anywhere in the world. You can easily get payments from different countries. This was something that was really hard a couple of years ago, and this has become way easier. So we see that when technology companies start in Colombia or Peru or Ecuador or any of the South American countries, they tend to expand first within the region into different countries, into Mexico, Central America. But now we're seeing that these companies are also going abroad and starting to operate in Europe, the US, and many times with local presence and many times completely out of the local country in the south. So that's something that I'm seeing the technology kind of startup or technology companies, and I think it's getting even more global with all the advancements that have been going on with banking, with neobanks, and everything around that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So from your perspective, now I understand there are a few reasons contribute to this growth and its trends, and also why it becomes so hard is one is the South countries are looking for new untapped or new potential for growth. The second, the modern technology make a lot of new idea, creative and innovations to be feasible to implement to the daily operations and foster the growth of the companies. And then so my next question for each of you would be maybe from with Heather, because your company is, as you mentioned, only invested in the women or female-founded companies. So from your perspective and your investment in so many countries, what are the big opportunities and potential for the women-owned companies, especially you live in UAE, for the stereotype, you know, the women's company or women's general status in these countries, they don't have the equal right as a man for the education, for the business, for the work. And do you see, is there any change and to help women to grow more in the business? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, we see it. The reason we started Mindshift was we see this as basically a global problem, which also is an opportunity. So that's, I think, how entrepreneurs look at things. We look at what are the problems and then how do we solve those problems? So even when I was in Sweden, only, you know, which is a country that prides itself in gender parity, only 1% of capital goes to female entrepreneurs, which is crazy in a market like that. And so we see it everywhere. We see it in Sweden, we see it in Asia, we see it in the Middle East, we see it in the US. It's really a global phenomena that we also think is a big opportunity, because by simply screening for gender at kind of the top of the funnel when we're looking for companies to source, we basically then do everything that, you know, kind of a world-class venture capital firm would do, which is looking for, you know, large markets, addressable opportunities, scalability, team, technology, all of the things that I think most VCs look for. So I think in that sense, there's lots of opportunity because it's still a very large problem. I think in terms of the UAE, actually, it gets I think, probably not a very fair reputation when it comes to how women are perceived. 30% of the parliament members are female. There's also a gender quota requirement for publicly listed companies where there has to be at least one woman on the board of directors. And I can tell you that just from the women I've met and know in the Emirates, they're very strong in work and also at home. We actually are very fortunate that 3 of our investors are Emirati women, Mona Al-Gurg, Najla Al-Midfa, and Halima Al-Awais. And all of them actually run large conglomerates from their families. I think also in Asia, there are many strong women in business. They just haven't been capitalized, I think, in the same ways that men have. I mean, of course, there are still legal status issues in countries like Saudi where there are some issues to work out, but there's been much, much more advancement in those markets. And I think, unfortunately, some of the stereotypes in the West aren't actually true.
Great. And I feel very happy to hear that women play a more important role, because my parents studied Arabic during the university. And when I was young, I said, how about I also study Arabic? They said, no, you're a girl, so better study English. So that's how my parents teach me about that. So I'm glad to see a lot of, and also same situation in China. Now all the public listings, Chinese companies on the board, you have to have at least one female, the board member into that. So glad. And
Actually, Helen, so I just was last week in Riyadh at the Davos in the Desert at the FII. I don't know if people know about it. here, but basically the woman who's the chair of the stock exchange in Hong Kong. So it was very interesting. She said it has to be one member from the other gender. So you can't have like all women who are board directors of a company, or all men, but she said this is fair. So I thought it was an interesting way to put it.
One step at a time, and especially the whole economy, even the China's economy is slow down. I think people are looking for the new growth pillars for world economy. And then for Guan, since you are distant from us, now my question for you is, I know you are a serial entrepreneur and being very successful for founding, to be a co-founder for 2 companies. And my question, and you were talking about the innovation, technology advancement. My question for you is, for the Southern countries in general, especially you're familiar with Latin America, how is the investment environment and the business environment for the young entrepreneurs on the tech sector or any sectors? Thank you.
Yes, so as I mentioned before, it used to be really hard to get investment outside from their own country. So if you think about 2014, 2015, there wasn't much investment from the US or European venture capitalists. The only investment that was available was investments from some of family offices. And I think the issue that entrepreneurs were faced with was that a small investment require basically giving away most of the company. So I have seen some investment where someone will invest $200,000 for 80% of the company. People frustrated with wanting to do their company ended up with this kind of businesses where at the end they didn't have control of their company for even a small investment. These have changed dramatically. We see even more today investments from the big international venture capitalists. We have seen a lot of investment from SoftBank. SoftBank even created our own branch for investing into the region. Even with SoftBank stop investing, Marcelo Clor, who was the one that kind of put a lot of money to the region, is doing another fund called Bicycle Capital to keep investing into companies in Latin America. We see a lot of investment from Sequoia, from Andreessen Horowitz, from all the big VC companies that we used to hear from, companies in San Francisco or New York. These are venture capitals are actively investing in tech entrepreneurs. So this has changed a lot. In 2015, when we joined Y Combinator, we were the only Colombian company, and I think there were a couple more from South America. When you look at how many companies are going into accelerators like Y Combinator or other big tech starters, for example, or other big accelerators, we're starting to see an increase from South American companies. Now, in the past couple of years, something else that I'm seeing is that this is not only for Latin America, but we're starting to see that companies in Nigeria, South Africa, and companies that didn't used to have a lot of entrepreneurs are starting up with new companies. I invested in a company in Nigeria, for example, that is creating a Rappi for Nigeria. And we're seeing that many African entrepreneurs are seeing companies that are being started in Southeast Asia or in Latin America, and they're starting to try to replicate those business models, looking at other emerging markets in Africa.
Great to know, and congratulations. I look forward to your next, the company you're going to start with. Now the last question is for Gohan. And Corning, of course, is very famous and also a global leader on the glass science and others. You have many companies around the world, the branch offices. We had a discussion actually early this morning. For this during the COVID period, there's a really disruption about supply chains globally. So my question for you is, I heard that you have manufacturers all around the globe. Is that a good way to tackle the risk of the supply chain disruption? And how about the benefit you do with the localization of the manufacture? And what's the impact for the community there? Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I think you just pronounced localization, and that's my trigger word. I got very, very excited. We also, in the last decade, how we can make factories all around the world. And we experienced this very, I think, very tough in China, having now 21 greenfield factories there. It's enormous. But the world is not running like that anymore. And if you want to burn your capital in a greenfield factory, that's not good investment today. We all heard about this digitalization, the currencies and so on. I don't believe that's a wise choice to do today. And with the supply chain disruptions, we also missed products in the last 3-4 years. And we became more vulnerable for those products and regions that has this big capability in manufacturing. And we also forced the expensive products to be sold in the emerging countries, which actually they cannot afford those. Now, as I said, localization is my fancy word because I am very much a big supporter for this kind of investments in the emerging markets to find a good, trusted local partner and then form a kind of partnership in any means. Could be contract manufacturing, could be joint venture, could be a partnership in any form, but a local partner. And then either by transferring technology, licensing agreements to cooperate with this partner locally, and then benefit from the government incentives, local funding, or even from this partner's own capital, so that big companies wouldn't necessarily put more risk in that country, and then help the economy grow in the same country, in the same region. And I can name a couple examples we just did within this year, and this year is not yet over. We have formed 2 joint ventures in India, one in life sciences industry, where we are partnering with a local company to locally produce and then using our technology to coat a vial, which is a glass envelope for vaccines. And then just last week, another good news, it's on the news, was a glass finishing in India for smartphones. And probably we all following what's happening now. Most companies are pushing their ecosystem in the whole manufacturing supply chain for smartphones, tablets, computers to India. So we followed that trend and we partnered with a company, and we're becoming live mid next year. So I can name a couple more that we did in Nigeria, in Brazil, and these are few examples how successful this can be, partnering with locals and supporting the local economy. And this means, of course, adapting to the local specification or the consumer needs, all right? We cannot dictate what we use must necessarily be valid or be used in everywhere around the world. It's different products, it's different cultures, it's different purpose of use. So we have to adapt to this new change. And this is where localization comes into game. Hired local people, engage with local companies, and then support the local economy. Thank you.
Great. Great to know that. And I think, yes, there are multiple solutions for, especially during the pandemic, this supply chain disruption. And China used to be the world global like manufacturer base, but now they all have a strategy called China Plus One. So that means that will provide a lot of opportunities, not only for the countries in the South, and even in the developing countries, there are new opportunities. Here today, we have in the audience, there's a lot of students participating, and South-South cooperation can be a new topic to them. and also the pictures you described and about your business and the potential growth in that region can be very, very attractive to them. So can you give them some good advice and suggestions for them if they want to develop their career in the southern countries? Thank you. Juan, do you like to start?
Yes, I will start. I think there are a lot of opportunities for sure, and more today, where all the different companies are growing, not only the technology sector, but just in general. As you mentioned, we're seeing a shift from around the world, from China manufacturing and China services to many times from South American companies. This is especially true in Mexico, where for the first time, the US imported more goods from Mexico than from China in many years. So my recommendation is to thing is, it's completely different to working in South America compared to working in the US. You're faced with challenges from all the different aspects, and this could be political, this could be on trying to do different things. When I moved to Mexico to start Rappi, it was just a wake-up call on how everything sometimes is a lot more difficult to get accomplished compared to when you're in the US or in Europe. So come with an open mind, thinking that it's going to be one of the hardest jobs in your career. But at the end, when you look back and you can see how many people you're helping and how you're able to have much more greater retribution, like in how you're helping the different companies and how these companies are helping a region that is full of potential, then it's going to be completely worth it for all the extra work that you have to do.
Thank you. Heather?
Yeah, I think it depends. I'm not sure which stage of career a lot of you are at, but what I always say is just build your network. So there are actually a bunch of Cornell clubs, alumni clubs in all of these different regions and markets. I'm part of the club in Dubai that is focused on the Middle East. A great launching point, if you really want to work in one of those places, is to get involved with the club. They can help to kind of introduce you around the region where they are. They know different people, go to their events. Maybe if you're, for example, an MBA, a 2-year MBA, try to get an internship at one of those companies. There's also the opportunity for things like the treks that are done to different markets. And I think, again, building those networks is really critical, because a lot of, at least, and I think this is true across most of these markets, but it's a relationship business. So you really have to know people and be part of these communities to be able to work there. And I think to be effective, you have to have the relationships. It's not often, we always say in the Middle East, sometimes it's who you know, it's not what you know. So I know that's not what a lot of people like to hear, but that is the unfortunate reality. And so the more you can network into these different, whether it's family offices, we still very much have the environment where maybe like 10 families own a lot of the conglomerates. Some of that's changing a bit with, technology and startups and some of the decentralization that we see, but I think it's a slow process. So you really do have to break into those networks in order to be successful and to have a career in these markets. And you need to spend time there. That's another thing. I think we see this so much in Dubai, and it's become a big thing now in Riyadh as well, where people, all the time we get these, a message on LinkedIn or whatever, hey, I'm going to be in Dubai for 4 days. Can I meet you for a coffee? Like the whole fly in, fly out culture is, I think, not effective. You really need to come, spend time, understand the culture, understand the society, make friends, start to kind of get it. And there's no way to shortcut it. This isn't something you can use, I don't think, like social commerce or something to replace. It's really about, sitting, drinking tea, kind of building relationships. And it just takes time. And it takes, I think in these markets, especially, it takes time to build trust. So you can't come and expect to have these relationships and these kind of business success in just a few months' time.
Heather, that's an excellent point. I think what I got from your message is networking, and that actually you stole my thunder. That's a absolutely. So when I look into this audience, and this is just a small representation of the whole school, I guess, I think Dean Caroli, you must be very proud. Here is a United Nations sitting in front of me, right? Excellent picture. And yeah, bravo, bravo. So students, people from all over the world coming here for one purpose, to get better, to get more educated, to share their experience and then gain more experience. And this is a wonderful picture. I hope that you, even now or after graduation, will still bear on your connections here. And based on these connections, you will be doing much better than what we are doing today. I guess these connections will help you to understand the global dynamics. When we say it's a global, it's now, I think, a village, right? But we still insist not to accept this. We still being triggered by the norms that we were learned or we were told to. But you guys here, you have a different future. You have a different perspective. And by getting or staying connected, that will be the biggest power that you may contribute. And I think that that's all what we need for the future. So big thank you.
Great. Great comments. I think it's not only apply to students, but also good for the adults, grown-ups like us. I'm not calling myself dinosaur. So here, because in the PR world, there are lots of young people. So sometimes I joke. And yes, I was told we still have a few minutes for the questions from the audience. So there's a question for Heather. As someone who has experienced both the East and the West in business, what advice do you have for female founders who may be pinned with stereotypes?
Okay.
for Heather.
Yeah, thank you. So shall I go ahead and answer?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, I think just try to not be bogged down with the stereotypes. I think they face us all, and we just need to do our best to ignore them and to just be who we are and be authentic and use our voice to also, when appropriate. So not all of the time, but when we can. Don't fight every battle, but choose your battles wisely and be your own person. I think that's all that we can ask, really.
Great. Be confident and yourself. Any supplement ideas from gentlemen for this question? Okay. Yeah, let's move to the second question. Second question can be answered by any of you. What kind of pitfalls have you tackled to implement localization model? I guess it's for you, right?
Right. I think the biggest mistake that man can do is that say, I know the best, right? And now you heard that localization triggers my passion. So I think respecting the local experience, respecting the know-how, how big business are done in that specific culture. And believe me, it's different in every country, is I think the wise thing to do, not to try to adopt others into that specific country, but learn, understand, and adapt to that specific country, I think is the biggest gain that we can do. And that's Heather, I'm sorry, I am pursuing in those businesses that we represent in the specific countries. I respect my local leader there and try to follow their guidance.
Yeah, excellent answer. I totally agree with you. Respect the local culture and practice is very important for your success. Next question is, what are some of the practical considerations companies like Cornell take into account when looking at investing in new emerging markets? That's exam day for you.
That's, well, that requires a long answer. Let me try to think, how can I summarize this? In most of our products and technologies, we start from the very beginning in the supply chain. We make, for example, the protective glass for smartphones, right? And then that glass goes to display manufacturers, put the display module on, and that goes on to OEMs, where they finally assemble the telephone, the smartphone, and then goes to the consumer. So we always start from the very beginning of the supply chain. And I believe if we start, doing this glass in a very good emerging market where there is no supply chain that we can pursue, I don't think that will be a good business case. So we choose those areas, those regions where we can complete the whole ecosystem and be effective from just-in-time production to please our next generation of supply chain, and then bring it to the hands of consumers. That makes more sense. And I think that's a good example by saying 15, 16 years ago, this whole ecosystem for this smartphone manufacturing assembly was China. Now it's shifting to India, to some part of Vietnam and other countries. So we are looking specifically for this in those regions where we can have the full ecosystem built, that we can contribute to the society and also to the product chain.
Yeah, and just also maybe to add, maybe from kind of what we look at as investors going into those markets. So for example, we haven't invested in Egypt or Pakistan. A lot of it has to do with getting hard currency out of those markets is very difficult. And there's been kind of historical issues around devaluation. We have invested in Turkey because we believe we can get hard currency out, but also because the companies, we've invested now in 2 companies there, and one, actually most of their sales and revenue is coming out of the US. So, they're earning in dollars, but they're manufacturing actually in Turkey. So it's a low cost center. And also there's very good tech talent there that is much more affordable than in other markets. And then obviously things like political regime, although we were talking earlier about Turkey and some of the issues, if it's, it's always kind of a hard assessment, because especially in venture capital, we're usually in these, and we're early stage investors, we're often in these companies for really, I would say 7 to 8 years or so. So things change very quickly in a lot of these markets, and you can only control for so much, but that's also kind of the risk reward equation that we use and that we're always looking at.
Great, thank you. As my understanding, yes, there's a lots of opportunities in the emerging market, but also unexpected risk associated with that. So do your good due diligence. And last question is for Guan. What are the main risks you are seeing in the next 2 to 3 years for tech entrepreneurs in Latin America?
Yeah, so fortunately, I don't see any immediate risk in the next couple of years. There have been a lot of changes in governments. In Colombia, Peru, and other countries, we have seen that candidates from the left have won. And at the beginning, there were a lot of worries that these new governments will restrict how these tech entrepreneurs work. What we see today is that it actually haven't affected tech entrepreneurs as much. We have seen a devaluation of currencies in countries like Colombia, Argentina, but it's actually helping. We, for example, or Rappi, we have a lot of employees in these countries, and as we export services outside, our revenues are in dollars, and our cost basics are in these devaluated currencies. So I don't think, and we're seeing that the changes in governments and political regimes are not actually affecting tech entrepreneurs. However, all over the world, and this is not only for Latin America, but venture capitals have changed how they're investing. We're seeing a reduction in investments. We're seeing that their LPs, now that the dollar is, has an interest upwards 5-6%, it's really hard to get money to invest in risky assets, including startups. So not only Latin America, but all over the world, what we have seen is that in the next 2 or 3 years, many companies that raise money at crazy valuations between 2021 and 2022, that are starting to come back to the table to meet with investments in venture capitals to see if they can get another round, and it's becoming much more harder. So in the next 2 or 3 years, companies have to shift their focus from growing at all costs into building real companies that have good economics, that have good financials. And I think that's a risk that I see not only in Latin America, but around the world.
Thank you, Juan Pablo, Heather, Gokov, and Helen. That was really engaging. We're going to take a really brief, 5-minute coffee break here because we want to ensure that we're on time for the special address that's to follow. So if you could all try to come back as timely as possible, it'd be greatly appreciated.
You are fun and great. Have you seen? Really? Yeah.
Among these ladies, it's always fun.
So, the award will be given to you right after. Okay, so 3:30 will give you the award because then the fire chat, I think, until we have to leave. So we'll do it as we say so much. And we will be amazing. Okay, thank you.
Just real fast.
That was really good. Congratulations. That was great remark. It's really something to see, right? It's really good. Thank you, Helen. Nice job.
Thank you.
Well done. It's great talk.
I'll look after you.
My name is Faith. I'm on a background studying government exchange management. And I'm actually studying abroad that next semester. Yeah, so it's a program where we intern while we take class. That's a semester. And I had for this actually with the health case competition. Yeah, but I saw that you worked in Amtrak, Beijing, government affairs. I know, yeah. I'm actually applying for the internship role there.
What am I doing wrong?
So if we could have everyone return to their seats, we'd like to get started with the next thing on our agenda here. Good. So next on our schedule of events for this afternoon, we have a very special conversation that will be led by our own esteemed Dean Carulli, who's joining us today, obviously. And also, yes, and a round of applause is in order. And also, I'm honored to have as our guest today the former president of the Republic of Colombia, Iván Duque. There we go.
Good afternoon, dear friends of the Emerging Markets Institute. How about that? Yes, good afternoon. I have come every year to this conference, and I have to tell you, dear friends, it feels to me like a warm blanket to be here. That's what it feels like to me. This feels like my home. I'm honored to be able to do other things, but it is a warm blanket of goodness, and with all the gnarly issues that we deal with and talk about on this complex topic of doing business in emerging markets. But it is just so energizing, and I thank you all. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you His Excellency, the former President of the Republic of Colombia, Iván Duque. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So I'm going to say a few words about you, and then we'll talk. President Duque was the youngest elected president in Colombia's history, 41 years old, 2018, renowned global expert in security affairs, sustainability, conservation, green finance, and the energy transition. We're going to talk about that. He has served as a distinguished fellow of the Woodrow Wilson Center at Oxford University, and he holds distinguished roles with the WRI, the FIU, and the Bezos Earth Fund, and various other prestigious organizations, too many to list. I like to talk about his most notable achievements during his presidency, which is in terms of expanding environmental protections, launching Operation Artemisa to combat deforestation, and promoting the Letitia Pact for the Amazon's protection. And his administration was firmly and resolutely in the lead in addressing COVID-19 challenges with a robust healthcare system and in a very fiscally responsible way, ensuring resilience. I am also very pleased to inform you, dear friends, that President Duque has kindly agreed to serve, and this is an announcement, so please listen, as the inaugural Cornell Emerging Markets Institute Distinguished Fellow. This is a new program that aims to, and here's the quote, recognize excellence in an international career as defined by its positive social impact, and to provide opportunities for selected leaders and the university community to engage with each other. So we will be inviting President Duque during the spring this year to do regular visits in different installments of time where you will be able to interact with him and exchange your thoughts, and he will exchange his thoughts. And I cannot wait to welcome you to campus. It's going to be fantastic.
Dean, thank you so much. First of all, Dean Caroli, thank you so much for those kind words. And I have to say that I'm so honored to be here at Cornell Tech in New York. And I'm so honored to see so many fellow Colombians here in this room. I also want to thank Lourdes Casanova, who has been a friend for multiple years. And I have to say that I'm honored to be this inaugural Emerging Market Institute Fellow. And my aim is to be close to the students, close to faculty, and be able to exchange experiences. So let's initiate our conversation. And let me tell you that all these ambassadors from Colombia, men and women that are so brilliant that I've seen in this room, are going to convince all of the rest non-Colombians to come to Colombia pretty soon. So
all right,
it's a great honor to start with.
So the Tourism Council of Colombia is very excited. So what we were going to do for a few minutes, and somebody needs to make sure we watch because I'm going to get excited here and I'm going to be hard to stop. But I want to give a sampling of the kinds of conversations that I hope that we will have together, you will have together with President Duque. But I'm going to take the privilege of starting this off. So this year's conference's theme is Risks and Realignments. And we've had some sessions and we're going to have some more sessions today. Risks and Realignments, huh? And it's all leading us to sort of reflect critically on, for example, geopolitical tensions that are out there, financial instability, heightening challenges for cross-border trade and capital flows involving emerging markets. Now, we had a conversation a few weeks ago leading up to this, and you said some magic words to me in the context of Latin America, a special region in the emerging markets, and that you said that it needs to be viewed in the context of two lenses, or you said, I think separately, two sides of the same coin. So I think I would like you to tell this group what you mean by that. And then leading up to ultimately the question of how optimistic do you think when you think about the prospects for Latin America as a special region?
Well, thank you so much, Dina. What I will begin by saying is that when we tend to see Latin America, or when the world tries to see Latin America, you find quite usually the idea that Latin America, it's a very complex, very difficult, and maybe not the excelling region in the world. And I always believe that we have to challenge that, some sort of common wisdom that is around. Because when you evaluate what has happened in Latin America in the last 3 decades, you'll see positive signals that speak by their own. First, now we have Mexico, we have Colombia, we have Chile and Costa Rica, the OECD, and more countries from LATAM wanting to enter the OECD. Case of Brazil, case of Peru, just to mention 2 more. Second thing, largest investment in education, in healthcare, largest expansion of the middle class, highest number of exports as a percentage of GDP, highest investments in roads and connectivity, and a substantial reduction of debts at early years in life, and at the same time, the largest expansion of the life expectancy. So those indicators, looking at the multidimensional poverty indexes as well, show that these decades have been very important for Latin. Now, we do have sometimes complicated political times, but it's important to say that even, for example, in this year, we might see that LATAM is going to reach the highest foreign direct investment ever reached by the region. Also, when you look on average on the increase of that FDI, in the last 2 years, it has increased almost 55%. So that tells you that even sometimes the common wisdom is challenged by evidence. And obviously, I still feel that there are risks. You have a regulatory risk in many countries just because we tend to have frequent reforms on the way we treat investment. Second, sometimes the way we deal with contracts, it's constantly changed over time. But when you see the vision of Latin America through long-term investments, I think Latin America today can tell us that the markets are bullish on the region. And I believe those are the 2 lenses that we have to keep. That doesn't mean that we can say everything is a beauty, but still, I think those indicators show that today LATAM is becoming a region with higher potential. And maybe we'll get to more details, but I'll close by saying this. Agricultural investments and agricultural exports are also reaching highest levels ever by the region.
So it's both in terms of capital flows, like foreign direct investments, but also in terms of the trade dimensions. Both are complementary and reinforcing, it seems. So notwithstanding that, we are seeing growth. Now, the second thing that we talked about, that I know that for which you feel great passion, because your record as president clearly showed this passion to the world, was about the green transformation of the world, and the roles and responsibilities that specifically private capital has to towards financing mitigation and adaptation for the transition. Yeah. And so I want you to talk as you see fit about what you think are the important mechanisms that are in place. How about maybe perhaps where there aren't, where where we need new mechanisms, but they don't exist, and what the opportunities are there. So,
well, I think you raised a very important point there, Carol, because the main challenge that we see in the emerging markets regarding climate And I'm glad to see here Marco Troyo, who's a dear friend who's also at Oxford University. We had this conversation previously. Most of the emerging markets are highly indebted. When you look at the global South level of investments, according to the IMF, we're seeing an average of more than 90%, which is pretty high. So that means fiscal space for climate investments are very limited. And when you think about what options do you have to finance, well, the resources are not going to come from bilateral donors. I mean, we could receive resources, but they're not going to be the ones that we're going to move the needle. And neither is going to be pure philanthropic resources, because they can be leveraged, but they don't make a difference to move the needle substantially. So the question is, what can move the needle for climate investment in emerging markets, and particularly in LATAM? And that's where I believe the concept of trustworthy and integral carbon markets will play a role through carbon credits, through green bonds, through corporate green bonds, but also, and this is very important, through guarantees and through biodiversity credits. And if we don't have that clear, we're just going to commit a big mistake. So it's very important to connect the climate needs with the funding from a market perspective. And I will add to that, that the other important benefit that Latin America plays in the world adaptation is that we know the Amazon is important. And maybe the world has a slight view that the Amazon is important. But if we don't get the Amazon right, we're not going to meet the NDCs from the Western Hemisphere by 2030, nor the indicators by 2050. And the fact is that we have lost more than 25% of the Amazonic land due to deforestation. And the only way that we are going to protect this very important hotspot, it's by creating market-driven, nature-based solutions for conservation, for restoration, and at the same time for biodiversity protection. And I think the best way in which we can make this work is to effectively be able to quantify what biodiversity is. Colombia is a superpower of biodiversity, second more biodiverse country in terms of size, and the highest levels of biodiversity by unit of territory. And if a country like Colombia is able to determine what is the value, we will be able also to get market solutions to pay for conservation. And I think this is not only a great potential for the region, but a great opportunity for corporate involvement and corporate contribution through the climate crisis, through the protection of biodiversity.
I'm really glad you're talking about this. This is my big passion right now. For those who have seen me giving speeches and talks about this, is about the role of private capital and mobilization to deal with biodiversity loss. And you're absolutely right. Colombia is in the center of this, being the #2 most biodiverse country in the world. I was thinking, I had statistics here, 63,000 species registered in Colombia, of which 14% are endemic. Second most biologically diverse nation on the planet. Colombia can be a real important point of departure for so many others who are not paying attention to this.
Well,
yeah,
Dina, I have to say something, and it's not to talk about my previous experience as president, but it's about the political willingness and also the consensus that is needed. We have very polarized politics, as happens all over the planet. But we can say that we were able to pass unanimously in the Colombian Congress, the Climate Action Bill, in which we said we're going to reduce by 51% our emissions by 2030. And we launched the idea of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. And this bill allows us to follow closely all the evolution of the different policies. But I'll mention 3 things that happened through market mechanisms. 1, we were able to pass from 13% declared protected areas to more than 30%. On maritime areas, 38%. On land, 31%. And we did it 8 years before the year 2030, which is the global end line. Second, When we started the administration, I remember that I called the team that we had in the energy sector with Minister Suarez and Vice Minister Mesa, who later became the minister. And we saw that Colombia had only 0.2% of the energy matrix in non-conventional renewable energy. So we said, okay, let's launch an auction. And the first auction was a disaster. No new projects came for those non-conventional renewable energies. And I remember Minister Suarez came to my office and said, I'm resigning. And I said, no, we learned from this experience. And then we launched a edge-to-edge auction. Both edges, buyers and sellers. And Dean, we passed from less than 50 megawatts to more than 2,000 megawatts in construction already built and operating in Colombia. And besides that, and I'm glad the former president of Petrobras is also here, we made Ecopetrol become the largest generator or auto generator with non-conventional renewable energies. And third, and I'll finish with this, we were also launching another message. And it's, okay, how can we present Colombia to the markets to be able to have trustworthiness? And we were the first country in this hemisphere to have a green taxonomy of all the environmental policies. We launched it here in New York at the New York Stock Exchange, and we were able to launch 2 green bonds with 7% greenium based on credible indicators. So if there's anyone that can doubt that markets can be a solution, there you have 3 indicators that have worked alongside with the market.
So I think this is wonderful. Thank you very much for that. I feel like I'm standing up and applauding, but we will in a minute. But I would like you to take one more step and say, as clear as it has been, that these type of, I'll call them public-private partnerships, incentive-based programs spurred on by your administration and subsequently towards fostering this transition. Why, and speculate with me, why is it, do you think it's so hard for other countries? Yes. 121 have now signed on to the Kunming, Montreal Convention on Biological Diversity in December. Yes, that happened. But why is it so hard in other places? Not just emerging markets, okay? This is all developed market challenge too. Why do you think it's so hard for them to quote unquote get it?
Well, I think we have to see this with a criteria that is very important. And I'm recently reading a new book by Tim Marshall on geography. And Tim Marshall has made these arguments about how geography matters in terms of development policies. And in fact, geography matters. We're blessed in Colombia because our energy matrix has 75% of the energy matrix in hydropower. And we have land in La Guajira with the possibility of maybe installing over years more than 40 gigawatts of solar and wind. We have higher speeds of wind than the northern part of Denmark. And there are other parts in Latin America that can also be possible. But there's something that I have to say, and this is a headline that I've used many times. There's no transition without transmission. So we say, okay, let's install the windmills. Let's put the solar panels. That's fine, but we need to connect it to the grid. And some of the most important challenges is the time that it's taking the previous consultations for these kinds of projects. And people say, okay, it takes time. Yes, we know it takes time, but it happens that time is part of your project finance. And if time becomes a liability, then the investors will move forward in other regions where the timing, the contracts, the taxes are more stable, and we will lose an opportunity. So it doesn't mean to leave communities aside, but we have to involve communities in order to accelerate the timing of this transition, because as I said, without transmission, there's no transition. And also the other thing that I will highlight, Dean, is we need to understand that companies have to invest in biodiversity protection. People believe, okay, that's a nice thing to do. It's a moral thing to do. It's an existential thing to do. And if we get to involve more companies in restoration, in recovery, and at the same time in protecting biological space, and especially considering that we have lost almost 70% of the world wildlife in the last 5 decades, which is a biocide, we can get companies to become the accelerator, the most viable accelerator of a massive mobilization of capital that is needed for these purposes around the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, the inaugural Emerging Market Distinguished Fellow, President Ivan Duque. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. I think it's going to be a great visit.
It's a great
Thank
honor.
you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you very much. Is this swag? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. There's a book. That's great. I look forward to welcoming you. It's going to be fantastic. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you. Oh yeah, and this is really important. This is really important. Thank you. Great. Oh, one more, Marco. One thing we know about the Emerging Markets History Conferences, we like to take pictures. We very much like to take pictures. It's all good. It's all good. Okay. So can I invite Gail to come on up for this next part, if you don't mind? Lourdes, would you like to join at this point as well for this presentation? I know Gail would like to. Gail's going to join me here. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gail Cañizares. Very, very, very important supporter of our work, our good work here at the Emerging Markets Institute. And well beyond, and well beyond. So I'm going to look at my notes, forgive me, because I want to make sure I get all these things correct. It is my honor now to announce this year's winner of the Cornell Emerging Markets Institute's Cañizares Family Distinguished Alumni Award. And that award winner is none other than Heather Henyon, founding partner of Mindshift Capital and proud Johnson School MBA alum. So you have heard Heather speak. I'm going to say a few words, but first of all, you need to know that this award recognizes professional and business career accomplishments, as well as social and human development in emerging markets related to Cornell University's mission to do the greatest good. That's what we Cornellians do. We go out into the world to do the greatest good. You've heard that before. The words of Ezra Cornell himself. This 2023 selection committee members, which included past year's recipient, Paul Kavuma, MBA 93, they cited Heather's innovative and social entrepreneurial spirit as founding partner of Mindshift Capital, this global venture fund you heard about in the previous section, based in Dubai, that invests exclusively in early stage women-led technology companies. It's backed 18 companies led by 24 female founders in 5 different countries. She has almost 20 years of experience in venture finance, entrepreneurship, emerging markets, angel investing, You heard about her involvement with the Women's Angel Investing Network. You heard about her founding the Grameen Jameel Microfinance Corporation. Lots and lots of deals. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot tell you how proud and pleased we are to be able to honor Heather Henyon as the 2023 Emerging Markets Distinguished Alumni, Cañizares family Distinguished Alumni. Would you like to say a few words to everybody out there?
Well, thank you so much first, of course, to the Cañizares family for bestowing the award. And thank you, Dean Carlai and the Johnson School and and Lourdes, who's now out in the corridor. But thank you, Lourdes. So thank you. This is such a great honor, and it's really nice to be recognized because there's a lot of work, as many of you probably can imagine, going into getting to this point and creating something like Mindshift Capital. And yeah, I'm very honored. I'm also want to say thank you to one of my longtime mentors who's here in the audience with us, Michaela Walsh, who's the founder of Women's World Banking and Microfinance. Michaela, can you stand up? So I don't know if anyone knows Women's World Banking, but it is a phenomenal organization. They were one of the pioneers of microfinance. So, okay, thank you, Michaela. I don't know. Do you want to come, Michaela? No. Yeah. So Michaela, actually, I heard her speak in 2005, right when I had started with Grameen Jameel. She was also the first woman to open an office for Merrill Lynch in Lebanon. So she has quite a career, and it was just a source of inspiration for me, as I hope that I can be for the next generation of women who follow in our footsteps, because we're going to get way beyond this, 2% of capital that's going to women, inshallah, as we say in the Middle East. So we really want to see more investors, more founders, more entrepreneurs, more women in business. And we believe that there's a rising tide from the generation of girls who I see on the ground. I do also a lot of sports coaching because I played soccer all my life. And for me, it's the sport of the world and a way that we can create and build humanity, actually. But I believe that this new pipeline, this new generation, it's phenomenal. So I encourage all of the women, the girls, to keep going and keep striving. And I believe that we're making progress, as difficult as it feels sometimes. So thank you very much. Thank you to my family, to my son, Alec, who's here, my husband, Armin Vartanyan, who also, I met him. He's one of the best things to come out of Cornell. He was one of my classmates at the Johnson School. So, and then, obviously Alec and my other son, Maxime Vartanyan, who can't be here because he's ill, but they are the best byproducts of the Cornell experience, I think. So thank you so much.
Well, you present it. Go ahead. Present it, Sarah. Do you want to say a few words? Turn on. They're on.
They're all on? Yes, apparently they are on. First of all, I want to say that I am really pleased. I'm in awe of all that you have done. We lived overseas a long time. We still spend a lot of time overseas. And I'm always struck by the differences in what women are allowed to do or supposed to do. Granted, here in the US, there's still a lot we're not supposed to do. But we do it anyway sometimes. We try, we keep pushing forward. But to go into some of the areas that you've gone in to, you are truly a trailblazer, and it is such an honor to put down the microphone and
So, so the symbolism is to push. I talked about the Sisyphus myth, and this one, the stone is up there and it stays there, thanks to pushing by leaders like you. So thank you very much. And also the previous leader you heard as well, so very important leaders who do their best to the improvement of emerging markets. So thank you. Thank you.
Program back to. Part of it.
That was a thank you for the incredible chat, Jean, with the former president. That was both positive and uplifting. It's good to have some good news in these difficult times. And also congratulations to Heather Henyon for the award. We definitely appreciate you being here with us today and sharing your thoughts. Coming up now, we have our next panel on realignments. It's going to be multilaterals and sovereign wealth funds. And it's going to look at the interplay between multilateral organizations and sovereign wealth funds and how these entities are reshaping the global economic landscape. We'll be joined by Shanti Shamdasani, who is the CEO and founder of the ASEAN International Advocacy and Consultancy Group. Marcos Troyo, the former president of the New Development Bank and Transformational Leadership Fellow at the University of Oxford, as well as Joyce Chang, who is the chair of research at JP Morgan's Corporate and Investment Bank.
Thank you, Clarence. And Vera Songway is also going to be joining us virtually whenever. Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sana Alibai, and I am a student here at Cornell Tech and a proud member of the Emerging Markets Institute. And this conference and topic is ever relevant to me because I was born in the Congo and grew up in Kenya, and most of my work has been in emerging markets. So it is my honor and absolute pleasure to be moderating this panel today. I welcome you to this thought-provoking and insightful discussion on the intersection of multilateral institutions and sovereign wealth funds. As our world becomes increasingly interconnected and as financial markets grow more complex, the role of multilateral institutions and sovereign wealth funds has never been more significant. Our esteemed panelists, experts in their respective fields, bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to shed some light on the intricate relationship between the entities. And I'm super proud to introduce our panelists today. And I think Clarence sort of gave us a little bit of a heads up, but I'll do it again. We have Joyce Chang, who is the chair of global research for JP Morgan's Corporate and Investment Bank. Vera Songway, who's joining us virtually, and she is the chair and founder of the Liquidity and Sustainability Facility. Marcos Troyo, who is a transformational leadership fellow at the University of Oxford and distinguished fellow at INSEAD, and Shanti Shamdasani, who is the CEO and founder of ASEAN International Advocacy and Consultancy. So today we aim to explore the strategies, the challenges, and the opportunities presented by the collaboration between multilaterals and sovereign wealth funds, as well as the broader implications for global finance, geopolitics, and the pursuit of sustainable development goals. So we'll begin with the opening remarks from all of our panelists, followed by some Q&A, and then the Slido will be up, so I invite the audience to participate with questions if they have any, and we'll kick things off with Joyce to begin our discussion.
It's wonderful to be here again with all of you, and I thank Lourdes for her commitment for bringing such a diverse group of policymakers, academia, and students together. And we are at a moment for emerging markets where there's a lot to talk about. But the first thing I would say is that what has stood out over the last few years is the resilience of emerging markets, and Latin America has been a standout. When we do surveys on where are you likely to increase your investment, Mexico comes out number one. Brazil comes out in the top three. And even as we take a look at these economic forecasts with still concerns about whether there will be a recession, we see that in Latin America next year, we have Latin America growing above the developed markets, at north of 2%. And there's a lot that I would say about the resilience of Latin America and of the emerging markets countries ex-China. They didn't increase the fiscal spending the way that we saw in the developed markets. There was the adherence to inflation targeting, and there was much earlier action that was taken by the central banks, to raise rates, where they started in the first quarter of 2021, where they've already been in the position of easing. But we're also seeing more challenges now. There are fears that inflation is coming back, higher energy prices, that we may have sort of plateaued at how much inflation can come down. And there is concern about the ability to ease rates further. Although we do see in Latin America, for Brazil, we still think that you will have a lot of easing that comes out of Brazil from very high real rates, but a little bit more of a mixed picture here. And I think, as we've heard, the debt has been a challenge. We saw a very big increase in debt levels during the pandemic, along with the fiscal deficits. It was actually less of an increase in the emerging markets ex-China countries than in the US and China, which really, both of them together, have increased their debt burden to such an extent that they're half of global debt. China has a debt ratio of 282% of GDP. So very responsible policies that were taken. But now we've moved into this realm with the move in real yields and in treasury yields, which is much higher, which is, I think, much more complicated now for emerging markets. So I wanted to talk about some of those challenges. And what the slide shows is just that many countries were able to borrow at low cost. You'll borrow longer maturities, but if you were to borrow today, given how the markets have repriced with US Treasury yields having hit 5%, it's a much higher financing cost and a much higher bar. It makes the multilateral development bank financing even more important, and finding creative ways to leverage that financing. But what you can see is, this is a very interesting chart. You can see that during the pandemic, the yellow bars are the private sector financing. Emerging markets became very dependent on the multilateral development bank financing. You can see that the yellow bars, which were private sector financing, was very high when it was low interest rates. It became a bit more complicated. And you can also see for the frontier markets that their debt, really from the mid-1990s until now, went up considerably. And this is where we do see some challenges in the frontier markets countries. Many of them will have to be in the market. The African countries, they can't afford to stay out of the market. And there's a lot more restructurings that will probably need to occur there when you look at the financing needs. And we've seen a complicated period. And what you can see here is really the appeal of some of the Latin American countries, but that's distinct from some of the other emerging market stories. So you still have very high returns that are available in Latin America, in Brazil, and in Mexico. But you can actually see that in emerging Asia, you actually earn more for owning a 10-year treasury bond or 30-year gilts than in owning emerging Asia. And if you look at the overall emerging markets index, the yield right now at about 6.8% is only 30 basis points higher than a US high-grade corporate bond. This makes it even more important to have creative solutions to leverage the multilateral development bank financing, to use the guarantees, to see if a multilateral financing can be more innovative, to take first losses to encourage capital in this environment that's changing as developed market yields run higher. But you can see that we are seeing some pressure on the capital flows to emerging markets, that after a period where they went up considerably during the pandemic, that has come down. And some of this is showing up in FDI flows. overall. So, and with the geopolitical risk as well, the geopolitical risk usually leads to credit spreads moving higher. So a real congratulations to the emerging markets for navigating all of these challenges so well. A bit of a different environment now that some of the developed market yields are almost in line with emerging markets, and an even bigger role for the multilateral development banks to play here.
So thank you so much, Joyce. So if I can just maybe ask, if emerging market equity funds are outpacing developed market rivals in attracting cash inflows, and seeing as how their policies have been more responsible in managing the fiscal deficit, what is the macro outlook for the emerging market?
So I think that there's real differentiation within emerging markets. We've seen very strong interest in Mexico, Brazil, and in India as stories. We've seen the frontier markets facing greater challenges. But I think that the things that we have always talked about at this conference, the importance of transparency, adhering to inflation targets, responsible fiscal management, and that kind of economic resilience, those stories have stood out. And I think that one of the challenges you have for emerging markets right now is that this responsible management, it's actually outperformed U.S. Treasuries. So as Treasury yields have moved up to 5%, you've seen emerging markets outperforming by 50 basis points. But that means that right now your return for an emerging markets versus a developed market is not so far apart. And that's really the question that's being asked is, what is the right risk premium to put on this? And how can official creditors help mobilize this capital to come in? Because it may not be as easy to raise funding in this higher yield environment.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. And a special thanks for you coming out here because, Joyce is here with a broken foot, you guys. So thank you. Thank you for all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And just, the passion to bring together people to think about innovation and solutions, because the financing needs are astronomical on the climate transition. We probably need to raise, anywhere, if you look at the estimates, to 3 to 4 times what is being raised right now.
Yeah. Thank you for your input. And if I can pass the microphone over to Marcos, who can give us some opening remarks on your work and your thoughts on the topic.
Thank you very much, Sana. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure and honor to be here with my fellow panel members. Lourdes, once again, I appreciate the distinction. Sana, globalization is evolving. And the way in which it is evolving, emerging markets will play a leading role. And I say that because perhaps it is possible to identify out there 4 key drivers that will very much influence how the world is shaped over the course of the next 25 years. I'm going to briefly mention this 4, and I think it will become very clear how essential the role of multilateral development institutions is in a way going forward. The first driver is today is the 3rd of November, 2023. On the 3rd of November, 2048, so 25 years from now, the world population will have moved from the current 8 billion people to 10 billion people. We're looking at a net expansion of the world's population of 2 billion people in the course of the next 25 years. The other day, Sana, I tried to look at how long it took to the world to reach a population of 2 billion people. There was this chief economist of the OECD, Angus Maddison, a professor of economics, and he was a very ambitious man. And he tried to gauge not only what was the world's population in the year Jesus was born, but also what was global GDP the year Jesus was born. So the world population, when Jesus was born, was 150 million people, the current population of Russia, for example. You know how many years went by before the world had 2,150 million people? That was in the year 1929. So in the next quarter century, we're going to have a population increase in the world that it took the world 1,929 years to reach, right? And if we cross the East River here, we go to the other way, to the other margin, United Nations, we're on First Avenue. We look at all of those flags. There are 193 flags out there because there are 193 seats at the United Nations. This population increase of 2 billion is only going to come from 9 countries. India, Pakistan. There's going to be a marginal increase in the population here in the United States. And all of the other 6 countries are from sub-Saharan Africa. So keep that in mind and what that will represent to how the world will be reconfigured. The second driver, Sana, is if you take into consideration the G7 countries, right, the mature industrial or post-industrial economies of the developed world. So the US, Japan, Germany, UK, France, Italy, and Canada. Last year, 2022, they had a combined GDP measured at purchasing power parity terms of $48 trillion. Okay, that's the wealth combined produced in a year measured at purchasing power parity over at the G7. But now if we take a look into what I like to call the E7, the biggest 7 emerging economies of the world, so China, India, Indonesia, Brazil, Russia, Turkey, and Mexico. Last year, they had a combined GDP measured at PPP terms of $58 trillion. So in terms of, once again, purchase power parity, the biggest 7 emerging economies of the world are already some 20% bigger than the traditional G7. So then think of the connection between these 2 drivers, right? If you are going to have such a dramatic expansion of the population, if you are going to have a bigger and bigger slice of the global GDP being represented by emerging economies, and as a matter of fact, whether you're looking at an arc of history of 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, the contribution to the expansion of global GDP is not necessarily going to come from the OECD countries. It is going to come from big emerging economies. And once again, think of the convergence of these 2 drivers and try to answer 3 questions. 1, where is the world's food going to come from? Because if you look at a country like India, for example, whose GDP per capita today sits at about $3,000, in a country like India growing at 7% a year, double its income per capita in only 10 years, do you know what's the destination of the incremental income when you move at such a high speed from such a low income per capita base from $3,000 to $6,000 a year? People eat more. They eat more, and then they eat better. So it's a calorie revolution, but it's also a nutrition revolution. And the second question is, where's the world's energy going to come from? Where are the infrastructure inputs going to come from? Who's going to finance that? And then there is the third question is, how important will be mobilizing the resources to push the transition to the green economy forward? Third characteristic of how globalization will be playing out in the next couple of years is, I am sure everyone here is an eyewitness to a redrafting of the so-called global supply chains. And one of the most interesting phenomena associated with this trend is the deindustrialization of China. It's not only because of geopolitics. Of course, something I like to call geoeconomic security is playing a role in nearshoring, reshoring, friendshoring away from China. There is decoupling taking place, but there's also a lot of neo-coupling taking place, new connections with China that were no longer there. But traditional manufacturing is going to other parts of the world, to India, to Mexico. It's very visible, right? But it's also because some emerging economies are being able to reskill their workforce, which adds an additional element of attraction to how these global value chains are being reconfigured. Today, there are more engineers coming out of universities in Mexico every year than in the United States. Right? And then the fourth characteristic, which once again has a lot to do with Joyce just described, is the metamorphosis of infrastructure, right? We used to think about infrastructure as being physical things, tangible things, and there is a separate sphere called the digital infrastructure. Everything is being blended together. There is a marriage between the physical and the digital aspects of infrastructure. So we either talk about tech-intensive infrastructure or we don't talk about it anymore. And then, and therefore I conclude my initial remarks, Sana, if you put together the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the New Development, you put them all together. In their collective efforts, they only account for about 5% of the emerging world infrastructure needs. So the kind of benefits that they produce because they're generating cooperation, understanding, and best practices disseminated across the board is in the short run more valuable than the actual financial contribution that they're able to mobilize. Which means that without the connections with sovereign wealth funds, with private capital, with a very complex and sophisticated financial system that we now have in place, the outreach of multilateral development banks will continue to be very limited, right? So multilateral development banks have to see themselves as musicians in an orchestra and not a musician playing solo out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marco. So you raise a really important point about how multilaterals are both key, but rather insufficient in addressing the needs of the emerging markets. So how do you see them playing a role in shaping the strategies to achieve the financial and developmental objectives over the next, however long?
Well, Sana, I think multilateral development institutions at one point were seen as reflections of a particular global order, right? I mean, you think about the World Bank, and it's impossible to dissociate the setting up of that institution with the fact that in the second half of the 1940s, the United States emerges as perhaps the biggest victor of World War II, and the US is responsible for 50% of the global GDP. Today, the US accounts for about 22% of global output. There are new kids on the block. So the multilateral development universe has to reflect this new realities in terms of the flows of power and wealth and influence. One mistake that this new institution should avoid, and I say that from the perspective of having led the BRICS Bank for a couple of years. By the way, I was CEO of the bank, but I was chair of the board of directors for a while, is to think that they can present an alternative that is positioned as an anti-Western perspective to the existing system. We're all much better off by having multilateral development banks that talk to each other, that interact with each other, that mobilize resources together, that share experiences. Then creating what I like to name multilateralism. So like as if there was a multilateralism that emerged from a Western world dominated order, and there's another one now that is springing from the new power realities in the developing world. So once again, the notion of complementarity is key for the multilateral development world to prosper, especially because one of the most negative traits of the global scenario that we have today is that there is a major deficit of cooperation involving the world's most important powers. I think, for example, of the context right after the Great Recession in 2008, when the G20 started to gain traction, if China's economic performance was positive, that meant a good thing to the United States. It meant a good thing to Europe. If Russia's economic performance was a positive one, everyone was feeling that the tide was going up to all boats. We are no longer in that scenario. We are no longer in that scenario. And I'm very concerned about how this deficit of cooperation may bring about divisions in global affairs that will be very hard to bridge.
Thank you so much for your insights. They're so valuable. And if we can open up the floor for Shanti to give us some opening remarks.
Thanks, Sana. And I'd like to start by thanking Lourdes for giving me this opportunity and the Cornell University. I'd like to bring a little bit of a different perspective because I come from Southeast Asia. I'm from Indonesia. I'll be in US for at least 3 weeks because I've got various speaking engagements. But the growth in Asia has been the center of attention for quite a couple of years now. Everybody's talking about the global South. Everybody's looking at Indo-Pacific. I'm working closely with the US government on the IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic basically framework. My point, the point that I would like to make here is that, and before I start with my narrative, is I just want to ask one question. How many of you here have heard the word Belt and Road Initiative? Okay. So 50-50, I suppose, right? Now, post-COVID, what we have seen, and I'm talking this in perspective of more of a Asia rather than the global, what we have seen post-COVID is there is a global anxiety stemming in the sense that, and this is very much evident in the sense that countries have gone more into looking at their national interests post-COVID. The foreign trade agreements that we have been working on in terms of forming multilateral, bilateral ties in terms of trades and services, that's sort of like just halted for a while governments look more domestic, more internal. And this is very much evident, for example, India as well. India signed out of RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. If you have heard this, they signed out because of the fear of becoming a global player, because they have a lot of domestic interests that they need to protect. And so other countries we see taking a little bit more of that route. Now, when we talk about the sovereign wealth fund here, there are two issues with this, and which a lot of times we don't hear this because in the past, and more likely in the last 1 decade, we see a lot of growth taking place. But the issues around the sovereign wealth fund is that the ownership and the control. We don't know who holds the ownership and the control. Now, we know that the sovereign wealth fund is basically managed by governments. It is a surplus from trade that they have, which they use to build their infrastructure and other economic development. And then they also invest in other foreign areas, right? But at the end of the day, we fail to realize when they're investing, who actually have the control over this. For example, two of the largest sovereign wealth fund we have is China and Abu Dhabi, right? Now, China have invested more than 3 billion in Blackstone. So, and Blackstone is the largest, equity fund, provider here. Now, moving forward, we see all this infrastructure that is being built, and we know that some of it comes from foreign investors, some of it comes from the private equity funds, and some of it comes from the, the global, the sovereign wealth fund. Now, in terms of building multilateral and bilateral ties, and this is something that we have seen, we have heard a lot of the word multilateral in the past 10 years, for example, is that to really achieve that global economic balance cross-border, and we see a lot of this taking place in Southeast Asia. Now, the diversified portfolio that they have placed, and this also, some of it goes into supporting the SDG goals, which we have. Question we have here is the transparency part. How many of us have actually gotten the report on billions and billions of dollars that is put into a project, and we have seen the transparency report? What actually happened to that, right? Now, this is, can this continue in the times of economic lethargy? I think we are in a phase where our economy is totally lethargic. And I'm not just talking about the global, but also in Southeast Asia, we see that happening. The growth rate prediction have been revised by IMF a couple of times. Nonetheless, Southeast Asia or even the Asia Pacific continue to be the growth driver for the world. Now, having said that, a lot of the multilateral, bilateral, and the infrastructure investment, whether it comes from sovereign wealth fund or from other sources, will be directed towards the Indo-Pacific, right? But who is there to really say, or who is there to really watch what the directions are? Who is behind all this portfolio that we are developing? Who owns it? Today, the world have problem with China's Belt Road Initiative, because China's Belt Road Initiative is a mega investment that they have put across the globe. This is one of the best example of multilateralism that we have seen in our history, right from Asia, Russia, Europe, all the way to even Antarctica. They have this put in place. Now, the fear is that there is a dominance control, not just economic, but political. And we have seen this happening in Pakistan. We have seen this happening in Bangladesh, right? We have seen the story of this. This is as a result of a mega investment, whether it comes from sovereign wealth fund. But the thing is, the key here is multilateralism, to promote trade, to promote services, right? In reality, what we have seen is when China incorporate these projects, they do not use the local resources. They, up to the point that they bring their own laborers. This is where the problem starts. And this is where the control, which I have said earlier in my opening remarks, is the ownership and control. Certainly on large, big infrastructure projects, the ownership and control lies to the people who actually puts in the most money in there, right? And then that actually compromised the spirit of multilateralism and bilateralism. And then the question is, again, we began to raise the question on who actually owns this and who's driving our economic growth. I'd like to also point out some of the problems which we have in any of the multilateral or bilateral, whether it's agreement or projects, is that the projects are managed either directly or indirectly. Again, we don't have the transparency of who's doing that. There's a financial stability concern as well. For example, the Belt and Road Initiative, so much money has been pumped into it, and then at one point, China realized they have a financial issues, and that this project kind of like slows down. And then there's the corporate governance, the political interference. Now, this is again very important point, and I see this increasing in the future in terms of multilateralism shaping the economic balance in the region, is the political interest that gets filtered into this, right? And I've mentioned about transparency a couple of times. I'd like to end by just highlighting some of the risks that we will see coming out in the future. And this is whether, mostly we see this in emerging markets, right? Some of the risks that we see in all these large projects and bilateral initiatives is that the negative interest rates or the low interest rates. China, for instance, I just came back from China and Japan just before I come to US. China is giving 0 interest rates to the special economic zone that it's developing in Hainan, and free housing to foreigners for 5 years. And when they showed me the plan, I thought this is being developed. It's actually developed in the last maybe 4 years. It is 4 times the size of Singapore, just for special economic zone. It has got 5 international schools. It looks like the future country. Everything is robotics there. And the housing they're providing for free is actually, looks like a Ritz-Carlton apartment to me, right? So this is how China is trying to redesign its economic balance, in the sense that they probably realized that by kicking out the foreign investors 20 years ago and using the technology to produce quality products is actually now hitting back on them. And they realize that now they need to change their economic policy. And they are building special economic zone to attract more investment back into the country. And I have seen list of American companies who have actually invested back into China again. So while we say that there's a diversification of factories moving out of China, the nearshoring is not in China, but in other countries. China realized this, and now China is taking a very drastic approach, giving every luxurious and every comfort to promote trade and industrialization back into the country. We don't know how successful they are going to be on this one, but I think they have embarked on a huge, huge agenda on this. So I think what we have in closing is, aside from the multilateralism, infrastructure, and economic development, the climate change has become one of the most pressing issues we have today. My question to the world leaders and my question to governments is that, are you going to continue to use the funds you have or conduct diplomacy in bilateral or multilateralism to promote infrastructure, pour into infrastructure projects, or are you going to use this to really help with basically the world manage climate change issues? Because climate change won't wait for us. It's going at the speed it's going today. Economic project and infrastructure can wait. So I'll end with that, and thank you very much again.
I thank you so much for those insights, Shanti. And I have so many questions, but in the interest of time, I'll move to Vera to give some opening remarks, and then if we have some time left, then I'd love to ask some questions. So Vera, please give us an introduction on your work and your thoughts on the topic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me thank you, as well as Professor Lourdes Casanova for inviting me for the conversation. I know I was supposed to speak in the CBDC session, so but I was traveling, just came back from UAE. Congratulations to the winner of the award on women banking. This is a very important part of, I think, where we want to go. I am going to talk a little bit about sovereign wealth funds, their role in global macroeconomic developments, and of course, multilateral development banks. I think Marcos has spoken very well about it already. And of course, I will concentrate a lot on also what's happening on the African continent. So sovereign wealth funds, I think, are really, really important instrument when we talk about global development today. And the reason why they are an important instrument, and we've seen sovereign wealth funds, one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world. Of course, we talked about IDEA, the Arab Development Investment Fund, but we also have the Norwegian fund, which is sort of the big one that we all know, and we see all the work that is being done there. On the continent, sort of the development of the African continent, the development of sovereign wealth funds, of course, started slowly. We, of course, have a number of oil exporting, commodity exporting countries. South Africa was the first one to launch a sovereign wealth fund. But today we have over 30 sovereign wealth funds, of course, on a continent that has over 50 countries. The sovereign wealth funds have grown in size. They started at about $18 billion. Today we have a sovereign wealth fund size of $300 billion. The Norwegian sovereign wealth fund is $1 trillion, just in terms of sort of comparisons. So we're nowhere near where we would like to be. But what that offers the continent, if well used, is three things which are very important. And I'll talk about their sort of intersection with multilateral development bank and development writ large. The first one is long-term patient capital. Essentially, what you can use and do with sovereign wealth funds is you can use that as national equity into investment projects. We heard Joyce and Shanti talk about the need for resources. If you can do that, then you can bring down the cost of capital, the cost of projects, because for a very long time, access to markets for a lot of the emerging market countries writ large, but Africa in particular, was prohibitive. And so we didn't have access to markets. And when we did have actually very high interest rates. So what we're trying to do then is to say, how can we make sure, and I don't know if you can see my screen, I'm trying to put up a set of slides very quickly just to give you, some of them are similar to what Joyce put up, so I wouldn't put them up for very long, but just to give you a sense of what we're talking about. If you look at the slide that you have now on your screen, it gives you a sense of the cost of resources if we go to the Eurobond markets as emerging and low-income countries. The yellow piece of that bar, and you look at really the pain that we've been experiencing post the COVID crisis, you have over 20 countries that are going to the market with spreads of 700 to 1,000 basis points. This is sort of not sustainable, right? Everybody always starts talking about sort of the high debt ratios, and we know that today over a third of the emerging and low-income countries are in debt distress or at risk of high debt distress. The red bar is the countries that are borrowing at, I mean, it's even embarrassing to talk about it, but over 1,000 basis points, you should not go to the market if that's what you're going to be fetching as cost of money. Of course, because the cost of money is so high, the interest revenues on that, or the debt service payments, are also particularly high. And if you look at the bar on your right-hand side, in 2024, we're going to see a very, very painful period for emerging and low-income countries, because a lot of debt service and principals are going to come due. Emerging markets will have to pay over $16 billion in debt service just alone. Many countries will not be able to meet that, and so we will begin to see quick defaults. And so the reason why that is the case, and you saw the first graph, but just to look at it, we always talk about the multilateral development banks lending concessional resources to emerging and low-income countries. Concessional resources is the green line, the one below the 200 basis points bar. This is the cost of Eurobond market access from JP Morgan. Joyce, these are some of your numbers as well. And so essentially, actually, the emerging market, which is the green line, the developed countries, which is the green line, borrow at concessional rates, right? If you're in Japan, you actually borrow at negative interest rates. The red line is frontier markets, so most of the African countries, and the blue line is investment, a high yield investment grade. So a lot of the emerging markets are in those two segments, which is the red and the blue line. And this is why, if the cost of money is so high, then you falling into debt is also, your probability of getting into debt distress is also very high. But what sovereign wealth funds can do is make sure that when you go to the market, and this is the conversation that we're having today, is when you go to the market for resources, you can blend. You can blend borrowed resources with national resources, which are cheaper. A lot of the times, even these resources that are raised from the markets are 10 to 15 years. If you're doing an infrastructure project, you actually need resources that are 20 to 30 years. And so patient sovereign wealth resources can actually help you to blend enough. So if you have a combination of your own sovereign wealth fund, some market access resources, and multilateral development bank resources, you already begin to de-risk your investment, because you're bringing down the cost of capital. You're allowing yourself some headroom to be able to invest more. You're also not using the national budget, so you're not using up your fiscal space on the other side. That's the first thing. The second thing that is very important about sovereign wealth funds is essentially if you have sovereign wealth funds, then when you borrow, you can also use domestic local currencies as part of your investment package. We talk a lot about FX risk. A lot of the times when we're trying to de-risk capital, we're talking about de-risking also the cost of foreign exchange risk that is going to be embedded in the projects. So if you're using a lot of your own domestic capital, you don't have that exposure, which is again another very important point. The third and important point about sovereign wealth funds is that sovereign wealth funds now on the continent have a governance structure that is very much akin to a lot of the multilateral development banks. They're investing in green projects, they're investing in innovation, they're investing in technology. It's very easy for multilateral development banks to work with the sovereign wealth funds, that is the South Africa Sovereign Wealth Fund or the Nigeria Sovereign Wealth Fund, the Egyptian Sovereign Wealth Fund. There's quite a number. More importantly, recently, what we saw for a long time, sovereign wealth funds on the continent did not have permission to invest outside of their jurisdictions. But now we're seeing many more of the sovereign wealth funds having permission to invest cross-boundary, also because of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement and the realization that if we need to do infrastructure from East to West Africa and North to South, we actually need to collaborate much more. And so we are seeing actually the formation of sovereign wealth funds coming together to work in concert. And this is, again, providing a lot more resources for countries that don't have sovereign wealth funds or have very small sovereign wealth funds, but are important geopolitically in either infrastructure and or population-wise. So Nigeria or Senegal, for example, Senegal has a very small FONSIS sovereign wealth fund, but if you put that together with the Nigerian sovereign wealth fund, you can actually build the road from Senegal to Ghana with a lot of sovereign wealth resources. So these are, I think, important points for why sovereign wealth funds are an important component in the global multilateral development structure, because they come in and they can also provide, now we see sovereign wealth funds providing guarantees for investments in countries. So essentially they're bringing additional resources. In the beginning, we talked about sort of all the multilateral development banks and what they can afford. The number is actually $130 billion. For all of the multilateral development banks in the world, what they do every year, what the resources they have to disburse is $130 billion. That's actually lower than the $300 billion that African sovereign wealth funds have. So even though the African sovereign wealth fund bucket is quite small, it's actually larger than the MDB system. And so the idea is to use this to leverage private sector investment. If you can use concessional funding from the MDBs or the sovereign wealth funds, we can bring more private sector investment in. Private sector investment leverages $1 to $4. So with 130 billion, we're arguing, we just wrote a report for the G20 on the MDB systems and how we can improve them. But one of the questions that we, or at least the suggestions that we have in that report, is to triple MDB financing from 130 to 390 billion. And that would leverage $1 trillion in private capital at cheaper rates, at concessional rates, so that we can fight climate change. For climate change, we need $2.4 trillion, with $1 trillion coming from the Multilateral Development Bank external financing systems, $1 trillion minus China. That is because China is already providing quite an amount of resources to itself for climate change. But that's where you begin to bring this interlocking players, sovereign wealth funds, national governments, and multilateral development banks. Philanthropy is an important component, of course, of all of this conversation as we go forward. Sovereign wealth funds are not philanthropic because sovereign wealth funds essentially are the protector of a lot of the savings of countries. And, it's for many sovereign wealth funds on the continent, they actually have an intergenerational component, which is savings for the future. And the governance of that part and that component of the sovereign wealth fund can be quite important, especially today with climate change, but also with, the divestment from fossil fuels. If you're in Nigeria, you do want to begin to save a lot, because as you move from, fossil fuels and getting a lot of revenue from oil to renewable energy, you will not be able to have the kinds of savings that you need. And so saving for the future, creating an intergenerational fund, is an important component of what sovereign wealth funds do. So I think what we need to do is look at how MDBs have not worked as often and as systematically with sovereign wealth funds as we would like them to do. But going forward, we hope that this is going to become an important component of this dynamic. Also because when MDBs work with sovereign wealth funds, the equity and investments that are generated also stay, you have the locals that own some share of that investment, and it's not just only private and external development capital that is owning the infrastructure that is created, but there is also a stake from the national governments and the citizens of those countries, which makes it even more important for governance. Thank you very much. I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vera and Shanti and Marcos and Joyce, and Thank you to all of you for being here and for sharing your insights. And we're so lucky to, have access to experts like you. And thank you again.
All of them online, and because it's private, so I did not have your. I did not have your. Oh yeah. I didn't need it. Shabda Sani, of course, the Sindhi, right? And you're, I'm from India, but I'm from Delhi. And you're studying or working there? I'm working and studying. Oh. That's a long time. So your family is all my family. Oh, nice to meet you. Are you? Oh, I work in Capital one of the bank. Oh, it's a bank.
So as we prepare for the next speaker here, a special address, we'd like to acknowledge the group that we have visiting from Colombia, the students. We're very glad you were able to join us today for the EMI event, and we hope to see you next year. And we also want to welcome everyone that joined us online today. We hope that you'll continue to tune in for programming throughout the next year, and of course, join us for next year's conference.
I'll be here for a month, but I'm going to spend more time in DC. Oh, nice. I'll let you know. And like seeing an Indian, like another. Yeah, yeah. But there's lots of.
What? Oh, goody, just what I need.
The extra hour, what's not tonight? Not like you lose an hour.
Then you're based here in New York. Okay, next time I'm here, I'll let you know. Yeah, I will. I'll message you, right?
If we could all make it back to our seats, we're going to try to keep things on time here as it gets later in the day. All right, we're going to move along with the next part of our scheduled programming here. So we have a very special announcement from New York State Assembly member, Steve Raga, who's here today and is going to be presenting something to our institute. So without further ado, Steve Raga.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks everybody joining us today. Our conference is such an important event to bring students, thought leaders, academics from around the city, around the country, around the world to come here into Roosevelt Island and participate and really learn from each other. One important thing and piece that I used to enjoy is I was an EMI fellow. A very proud EMI fellow, and also have a special distinguished accomplishment as I was also a TA for Lourdes. So I was so I was the one taking photos and but I just want to say that in my role now as an elected official in the state legislature, we do have a lot of commitments, partnerships, inroads with a lot of emerging markets. There are always opportunities for the state of New York and the city to interact and have delegation trips focused on economy, focused on business, focused on how we can help each other from our state and other countries. Right now, I'm helping formulate a few delegation trips based on economic priority and financial partnership with Nepal, the Philippines, Costa Rica, and we have a few more coming up. That's already on top of the delegation trips we're looking at already and how we could foster mutual cooperation and partnership between our state and also other countries all over the world. And I just want to, in my role here, also give a special proclamation from the state of New York for EMI. And I'd like to read off. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll spare you, but I do want to put that New York State Assembly proclamation. Whereas the great state is only as great as institutions who give exemplary service to their community. And whereas Cornell's Emerging Markets Institute at the Samuel Curtis Johnson Graduate School of Management provides thought leadership on the role of emerging markets and emerging market multinationals in the global economy. Resolved that as a duly elected member of the state legislature of New York, I recognize in the Cornell University Johnson Graduate School of Management Emerging Markets Institute, we have an outstanding institution worthy of the esteem of both our community and the great state of New York. Signed, Stephen Raga, member of the Assembly, November 3rd, 2023. Thank you so much. Congratulations, Lord.
Families here.
Big network. Huh?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'll try to be a little louder than Stephen. My name is Fireside. I'm the Johnson alum, MBA class of 22, also an EMI fellow, a proud EMI fellow. EMI holds a special place for any of us who've had a chance to be a part of. And this experience obviously would not have been possible without the hard work, encouragement, and dedication of Professor Lourdes. So I would like to thank you, Lourdes, for the platform you have given the EMI students and alumni as well. So upon graduation last year, it was pretty evident that there was a need to continue the momentum and energy of the EMI, and hence the idea of the EMI Alumni Club was born. And the main goals are connecting all the alumni around the world on an easy to use platform, and also have a place where career and job opportunities in emerging markets are presented. But most of all, we're going to have several activities. One of the significant activities that are that is my favorite is connecting alumni founders to investors. Obviously, there's a global talent for Cornell alumni who have great startups, and US investors are always looking for talent. But there's a gap. And as you heard earlier from Heather and President Duque, there's a perception. There's a perception in emerging markets, and that needs conversation. And the club is a place where learning happens and those conversations take place. We plan to invite investors and connect them with emerging markets founders, and including startups. And that's going to be one of the main activities of the club. And the first of such activities will take place early next year, and we'll be sending out information. You can contact Lourdes or myself or Danielle for more info. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for still being here. My name is Caleb Kavuma. I'm a second-year undergraduate student at Cornell. I've been working a lot very closely with the EMI team in my 2 years since coming here. Today, I wanted to talk to you guys very quickly about two things. First, to introduce you all to the Undergraduate Emerging Markets Institute. We're calling ourselves the Emerging Market Society. We're essentially a group of undergraduate students who are also extremely passionate about emerging markets and wanted to work more with Professor Lourdes, with all of the EMI team, and expand ourselves and expand the EMI network that way. We've started making a lot of progress in terms of actually developing research and actually working with the development team. We saw a lot of our people from the Emerging Markets Undergraduate Club have also helped with the research publications and were also involved with the internship over the last summer. And so our goal essentially is to start expanding our network that way. And towards the network expansion, the second thing that I'd like to talk about is the efforts that I'm leading and to try and expand the Emerging Markets Network. We've made a lot of effort to also start reaching out to our alumni base. It's something that Emerging Markets is looking into. But I want us to really expand much further than where we are. I want us to be able to expand, to reach out to other different institutions, to other schools, and get them to collaborate with us as well. As such, we were speaking to some of the Columbia students who we brought here today. I want to be able to merge a lot of the different institutions that we have with the combined passion of emerging markets. And I want us to be able to share the research that we have, share the work that we're doing, and share the amazing insights that these conferences can put out. And to that end, I wanted to just basically announce to all of you that I'm putting together a team where we are working on expanding that network to 3 major entities. One being the more corporate world and the private sector, to try and reach out to more of, like the amazing people we had today, to reach out to more of those caliber people and have them really involved in emerging markets. 2, to reach out to the more academic space as well. In the end of the day, we are a research organization, and we still want to be able to produce high caliber research and research of top quality. And 3rd, to reach out to students who are other MBA students, to students who are other undergraduate students who do have this passion for emerging markets, where trying to do it by yourself is very difficult. And I know for me personally, coming to join Emerging Markets Institute, being able to have that institution there really accelerated my growth in emerging markets. And that's something that I'd like to help provide for other students as well around the world. So thank you very much for Lourdes for giving us this opportunity. And thank you all for spending the time to come here. I'll pass back to Cañizares.
Thanks, Caleb. That's great. And we definitely look forward to partnering together on all kinds of projects to widen the scope of EMI. I'd like to invite, Heather Henyon to come down to say a few words ahead of our awards ceremony.
Heather, before we give the awards to the pitch competition to the startups, this is your world right now. So I would like you to give some inspirational words to encourage. It's not easy to be an entrepreneur. It's even more difficult to be an entrepreneur in emerging markets. The lack of funding is a recurring theme. And so how do you see this and how can you encourage them? And then how we can encourage women, and if you have some specific advice to women in this space.
Sure. Well, yeah, of course, definitely being a founder is not easy. So I think just being out there and starting a new business and taking risks, which is something we know in emerging markets, it's harder than maybe in the US socially and culturally to do something like this. So yeah, of course, just going out and starting a new venture, a new journey, having to fundraise, raise capital is can be really challenging. But I think also, if we think about it in terms of being an owner versus a worker, being involved and self-empowered and building your own business, building your own opportunities is something that is also very empowering. And I always encourage people to try it, see if they're able to build a business. And of course, there's nothing more rewarding than when as you feel the growth and see the impact that you have on your business, your society, your life, essentially, your economy is super rewarding. So I think in terms of women, I mean, I personally am a big believer that it's not the pipeline that's the issue. I think it's really how we go about bringing them to competitions like this. And we were talking about it earlier in our deliberations as judges, is there, I mean, we know, for example, even in the Middle East, something like in, let's say, a country like Lebanon, 30% of the entrepreneurs are female. I know from having been investing there now for over 10 years, probably about half of the founders in the United Arab Emirates are women. So it's more just how are we actually finding them? I mean, our theory of change at Mindshift is that by having more women investors, we start to actually attract more women entrepreneurs, because just like men attract men, women attract women. We're able to understand the businesses that they're building. We understand their lifestyle as they're going through maybe having a family. They want more flexibility, which is something we hear a lot from women. So, and that's one of the beauties of entrepreneurship is you probably work a lot harder, but you have a lot more flexibility.
We have here a woman, Daita Wasami, who was the chair of the pitch competition, and she also survived. So we have to encourage women like her in big red ventures and beyond. So thank you. And I'm also a woman.
Yep.
And I am surviving 33 years in business school. Not easy. Yesterday they called me, you know what? You're a dictator. Wow. I have the person who called me a dictator last night close to me. And so what happens is that sometimes you have to speak up, sometimes you have to bite your tongue and swallow a lot of your pride and move on. So what would be your advice? You can not be in a reivindicative move 24/7. You have to, as I said, that's what I've done.
Yeah.
So you have to just lower your head. I have also my co-author here, Anne Miru, who survived in a very, also in the United Nations for many, many years, not survived but thrived. So what is your advice in this very difficult balance into, okay, speak up sometimes and sometimes, okay, you know what, this guy, what he's telling me, so paternalistic. But anyway, so how is your advice?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I mean, I'm not known for being quiet myself, so sometimes my speaking up gets me into trouble. But I think it's like it's why not create trouble? I mean, the troublemakers are the ones who create change. So I think that we have to be vocal. And I think the other thing, I just the last few years lost both my parents, and it's been a very difficult time personally. I think what I really appreciate is life is short. It's shorter than actually most of us even realize, and it's finite. The only thing we can't get back is time. We can always get money back. Money comes and goes. But time we cannot get back. So I think doing something with your life and your time on this earth that is something you care about, that matters. This is what I've been trying to do, I think, all my life without really being aware of it. But by the time that we finish our life, we don't want to look back and say, why did I spend all this time, doing something I didn't really care about, that I wasn't passionate about? So trying to understand what your purpose is. And I've been very blessed. I've known my application to business school was in my application 20 years ago to the Johnson School. I said I wanted to manage an investment fund investing in women entrepreneurs. So that, like, I've always been very focused, and everything without realizing it has gotten me to where I am. But I've always known this is what I care about. And it hasn't always been a direct path, but I think getting here and just knowing what your purpose, what your mission is personally is really important.
Very, very excellent words. So just last word. So today, the economy today is getting a little bit better, or it's not too bad, but it's a little bit challenging to find jobs. So for MBAs who are graduating this year, and some of them still looking for jobs, what is your advice for them?
Never better time to start a company. You have a lot less to lose. I mean, if you're not trying to decide between an investment banking job that pays millions of dollars versus starting a company that pays nothing, why not choose it's an easier choice now than it was before, I guess, would be my advice.
Okay, and then one question from or two questions from the audience. Sorry, we have just some questions from the audience before we move to the giving the awards. Maybe
Sure.
repeat the question because
Yeah, sorry. So for those who didn't hear, the question was, why did I, or how did I decide to move to the UAE? So actually, so when I started this, so just to go back maybe because everybody always asks, why the Middle East? How did you end up there? So I was very intellectually curious as a child, and I kept reading and became very involved in Model United Nations. So I really loved languages, traveling. I lived on a bull farm when I was, 16 in France because I really wanted to basically see things with my own eyes. And that's part of why I actually wanted to study abroad in Syria, but my parents wouldn't let me. So I studied in Egypt, and I was worried that even then it was going to be too westernized. I mean, I've been going there now for so long, and I'm going actually in 2 weeks, and it's definitely not too westernized. For those who have been there probably know what I mean. But when I started this joint venture in Lebanon, it was with this family office that actually was Saudi, but their international operations were all based out of Lebanon. So it was easiest for me just to plug in there and start the business there. And then we had actually the war in 2006 in Lebanon with Israel. And so, the situation was just not very conducive to running a business, especially a regional business. We had to fly often. The
Hello.
airport would be closed.
How are
and all
you?
of these different. Oh.
All right, my foot's getting better.
Uh-oh, is that a remote mic? Yeah, and so just maybe to make it short, the board decided to move the company at my recommendation. I was the CEO of the company to Dubai, and we were working then in microfinance, and the concern was, the perception of Dubai is not one of, poor people, it's wealth. But, my argument was honestly, that one of the best things is just, it's so easy to be there, to travel, to just ease of doing business is very high. And because we were working across the whole region, that's how I ended up there.
Okay, and data.
I think, I'm sorry, I probably can't speak to that. I mean, I guess the only thing I would say is I'm a big believer in peace and stability as being conducive to business.
Okay, the last one. Yeah. Okay, so the question, any suggestions for business students who are interested in impact investment, but no investment background before?
Sure. Well, I think getting some experience in investment, I mean, it is kind of critical. One thing we didn't talk about is I actually worked on Wall Street to begin my career. And I worked at Standard & Poor's doing bond ratings. I also worked in project finance. I love Excel. I'm an Excel junkie. So I love finance. And for me, the power of what I've been doing is really using I consider myself to be a capitalist. So being able to use capital to do good, because I think business can do it much faster and more efficiently than governments. So we need the finance and investment experience. You can always intern. We take interns all the time at Mindshift. We've had actually some great Rohini from Cornell. We've had some amazing, we take MBAs. So we get a lot of MBAs from Wharton, MIT, Cornell. So if anyone's interested, please reach out to me.
Thank you. And now the last closing question. So advise them about the ups, not the downs, of an international career. Yours is an international career. We have here the United Nations, as it was mentioned before, many international students. The good and the not the bad, the good and the very good about an international career like yours.
Good.
Yeah.
I think just the opportunity for growth. There's nothing that accelerates your growth as a leader and as a person and as a human more than being challenged in a context that's very, I guess I will say, foreign to you. So travel, meeting new people, seeing new ways of doing things, working with people who are different from you for the same outcome. There's just something that is really, it just helps us grow so much as people. And I think as I get older, I appreciate that even more, because you could stay where you are, stay in your own town, your own village, and maybe after like 50 years, you'll have, maybe 10% of the growth that you would experience within maybe 5 years of the experiences that really challenge you and stretch you as a person. And it's not easy, but I won't talk about any of the harder, but it really helps you grow and it creates resilience, which is something I really appreciate, especially during times like COVID and personal challenges. It really makes you strong as a person.
Thank you very much. So please join me in thanking Heather and congratulating her for the award. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. So Julian? For the case competition, we'll finish with the case and the pitch competition awards. Julian? Okay, Matheus, maybe we can start with the pitch competition then. What do you think? Yeah, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so, yeah, okay. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I know that is a little bit late. So yeah, I was also late because I was there with because I was there in the lobby with the Colombians fellows and the president. So I was like between the president or the hour, but I am here. So well, first thank you again for the participants of the case competition 2023. It was a very tight competition. We took a lot of time to actually deliver like a result and conclude who were the finalists and the ranking or the order. So I want to thank actually the 5 judges that helped us, and I want to ask you for applause for the judges. But now I want to welcome Gohan from Cornell Corporation, the company who has found the case competition. Not just actually they support us with donations, but also Gohan has been part of the discussions. And so thank you, Gohan. And yeah, the podium is yours. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you again for those who stayed so late. We'll be enjoying the rest of the show today, I think. Well, I'm honored today to present the awards for the case competition. And amazingly, this year, there were 585 participants from 127 teams. And these teams from 49 institutions from 11 countries. What an amazing record. So I want to start with the finalists and the 5th award. Team Bluestone Consulting from University of Delhi, India. Are they with us now? They are? Yeah, it must be very late there now. So congratulations, Team Bluestone Consulting. And number 4 is Team Bricks from Cornell University. Now coming to the 3rd is Team Blazing Stars from IIM Indore, India. Team Blazing Stars is awarded with a $1,000 check and also a glass ornament from Glass Museum in Corning. How are we going to hand them this? Okay, yes, this will be delivered to them. All right, good. Now coming to the 2nd place is Team Fletcher's Frontier from Tufts University. Come on here, come on here. Team Fletcher's Frontier is awarded with $3,000 check and also a glass ornament from Museum of Glass. Congratulations. Congratulations. Bravo. Congratulations.
told you. There we go. Thank you. Congratulations. And the winner this year is Team Simulation from Cornell University, Hungary. Team Simulation is awarded with $6,000 check and also a glass ornament.
Well, thank you so much to our judges, to the teams who participated. It was definitely a tough case, a tough competition. Everyone put a lot of hours, so I really appreciate that you took the hours and the effort to trying to solve this big issue. I also hope that you learned it and that you enjoyed the experience about learning about Brazil, semiconductors, policies, and the region. From here, I will pass to my friend Matush, who will introduce the hour for the pitch competition.
So I know that there are at least 5 people here that have been waiting this whole day to find out who's the winner of the pitch competition. And I'm gonna make them wait just 1 more minute to find out. Because first I want to say massive thank you to everyone who's been involved in putting this together, especially Mike Mobius that's been funding this competition every single year. And of course the judges who I can speak to that deliberated very intensively on the different aspects of each business. And we made sure to include all observers associated with each team to make sure that they get feedback on what the judges discussed and what they can improve in the future. Okay, so maybe this was less than a minute, so let's jump to it. The winner of the 2023 Cornell EMI Mike Mobius pitch competition is Satellites on Fire. Matthias, congrats. Here's the check for the $10,000. Heather, I believe you're the only one that stayed. Yeah, pleasure. Yep, 1 second. I'll wait for Heather. Heather, you were in the room with the deliberations. So I'm curious if you have some thoughts to share also with the winner.
Yeah, no, very intense deliberations, and it was difficult because we had lots of interesting, I think, observations and discussions about the company. But I think given what you're doing and building, it was very relevant in terms of climate tech and some of the opportunities that we're seeing now with the focus on climate crisis. And then, of course, we liked the scalability of it and the traction that you've got to date. So thank you so much. It was very good.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you also for the feedback. It's always really appreciated. And thank you, all of you, for coming here to watch the pitch. Thank you all, also the Institute. I think it's amazing that you are giving these opportunities. You know, I was talking with Mateus, the importance of closing the gap of opportunities. It's insane. The things are really different in different parts of the world, and having the possibility to close these gaps and to help young startups that are making an impact in some aspect, either it is EdTech, climate tech, fintech, there are all things that aim for improving a part of the world that we see that can be improved. So we are on it, and thank you very much. We are going to do our best to invest this $10,000 in the best way possible. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, congratulations, Matthias and the rest of the team. As a, you know, from the Universidad de San Andrés, we are proud of your team and all the work that you have done. But especially, I wanted to thank the EMI Institute for giving us the opportunity. And this is the first time that our university is represented here. And of course, we are coming back, and we are excited for this. So thank you very much for everyone, and congratulations.
Take this. We're gonna keep it over there. Yes. Sorry. Thanks.
So that officially concludes the programming for today, and want to thank everyone for coming, and we definitely look forward to seeing you all next year. And you know, and if we can help, you know, partner on any projects moving forward, you know, always reach out. That's what this is all about. And thank you again, and I'll pass it over to Lourdes.
So thank you all. Every year, I think this is a miracle. It's impossible that with this a very tight budget, we are able to do that. This is not a miracle. It's the result of a tremendous hard work of all of you, volunteers, EMI fellows, students, conference committee, so many pitch competition committee, case competition committee. Julian spoke a lot, but behind Julian, there was a big group who developed the case, and who during the summer, and Julian said, okay, meetings on Sundays at 10 p.m. because he was in a Bain internship. So people, I mean, the students at 10 p.m., we all went to hear what he was saying. So very grateful to all of you. And we have, and also last but not least, my partner in crime, Anne Miru, that we do. Anne, come. At midnight, she says, this data is not okay. I called the guy at UNCTAD, and he said, is wrong. So my God, I hate the guy at UNCTAD who says at midnight that we have to review this data because this data is wrong. Thank you, Anne. I learned a lot from you. I learned a lot from all of you. And of course, here we have benefactors that make it possible, Gail and Rob Cañizares. Really, without your support, would not be possible. And I always forget many people, but Mark Yeager has been here from 6 a.m. and messages saying, This guy is unable to connect. Please, Mark, what can we do? This PowerPoint and this sound and the light. This is Cornell Tech. The light goes off. What happens? So, so definitely, and Osagi, Iris, that will be next year will be yours. The conference. Nilam, Lindsay, Clarence, and so many others. Really great job, Sana, TK, so many of you who have done a tremendous job. And as I said, it's not a miracle, it's the result of a tremendous group of students, extremely motivated, working for free. Daniel Dos Anjos, Paris, Elnas, who are upstairs in the, Elnas is there. Paris and Daniel is, Paris is here, and Daniel is here. Please, Daniel, come here. You have been here hiding the whole day. Yeah. So great. And Cara from the Cornell Tech team, Cara has been also tremendous. Marcela was here. So, so many working very hard. Daniel, I go there and I say, what happened, Daniel? And I go nuts and he keeps calm. Don't worry, we'll solve it. So thank you all really very much. And hopefully next year again. Daniel, what do you think?
2 or 3 years more.
So thank you all. I think is this a space, and now seriously, is a space for encouraging dialogue and building bridges. In a moment with so much turmoil all over the world, I think for me as and Anne as well as me, faculty, we need to encourage you all. There is hope, and we have to keep the dialogue and keep the building bridges, north and south, east and west, and south to south. And thus, we want to keep this space where we still continue the dialogue. And we promise you we'll continue as much as we can because it's very important and it's the guarantee for a better future for all of you in the future. You are the future. So thank you. Let's try to take, we always take a last picture. So let's try to be all here and take the last picture of the conference. Thank you, Mark. You can.
Yeah, comment back to the EMI fellow.
Oh my God,
Yeah. It's a very bright student. Oh, okay.
Hey, just smile and wave. Yeah. Oh, really? I wish I could. Okay. You mentioned that you live in Germany, right? I lived in 4 years. I can give you a bit background about it. You might be able to learn from India. I born and brought up in Bombay. I was there. Bombay. I know. The locals call it to the world. And yeah. Right. If you work for, might have heard of it. We do our business. Okay, I'll happily go. Well, right. I went to a rubber center. So I did. And then came back to New York. Okay.